Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with the Mimeoplasm Reanimator. This is a very powerful reanimation deck coming to us from Death Penalties. Death Penalties, thank you for supporting the channel. And if you want to see these decks a week early, you can join us on our Discord through the Patreon. It's a fun place where we chat about the new cards coming out, and also if you want to assist the people who send in their decks and give your own takes, it's the perfect place to do so. But here, the deck that I see is a deck I really like. I am a huge fan of Reanimator, probably due to the fact that, you know, I really do like black mana, and Reanimation is like, not uniquely, but almost in the core of Black's color pie. And here we have a really good example of what Reanimation looks like at higher levels. Because there's this weird kind of balance where Reanimation gets really good in the lower brackets or the lower power levels, but then kind of tapers off, because in high level Commander, you need to be able to take out all three of your opponents at once or really quickly outside of interaction. And Reanimation kind of struggles with that, because unless you're going for infinite combos, which notably this deck isn't, it gets kind of tricky to find that one card that's going to let you win through all the interaction, through your opponent's combos, and so on and so forth. So generally, we like looking at Reanimation decks for their power of card advantage or board advantage, which I think is, it's different from what you expect, but it's still very strong at higher power levels. And this is definitely one of those decks. As I mentioned before, almost all of the deck is tuned to be at a very high power. So we can see here that like we've got really low mana cards, really efficient counter spells, some fast mana with Dark Ritual. It's just really well built. And I'll go into the minutia of what the deck is and what I'd like to change, but I would say this is a pretty straightforward look at a really strong Reanimator deck. So if you've ever wanted to do that, and you've been thinking of maybe building one or proxying one, this deck is a really good starting point. And we'll be talking about reanimation targets at this power level, because it is a big question that once you are high power and these are the colors you're in, what am I bringing back from the graveyard to win the game? And we're going to go over that. But first, as always, we're going to go over the commander and see why the Mimeoplasm is such a good choice for the deck. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is the Mimeoplasm and why are they our Sultai Reanimator commander? Well, the Mimeoplasm is actually a super classic commander. This was one of the commanders that came out with the first commander product. So one of the commanders that was first designed for commander, which is really cool. The Mimeoplasm is a 5-mana legendary ooze, 0/0. They have one ability that says when this enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. It's kind of like melding 2 cards together, except for you're taking the text box of one of them and then the power and toughness of the other. But it's actually a little beyond that, because the original card that you take the rules text from keeps its power and toughness. We just get to add on the power of toughness of the other card. Now, depending on your power level, the Mimeoplasm is going to look very different. There's a lot to say about really cool synergies that use +1/+1 counters as like an outlet. And we're going to see one of them within the deck itself with the, I believe, the Fell Beast of Mordor. But that can be really cool, but it has a bit of a ceiling on its power, because you are often putting together cards that may not have, I'm going to say, crazy amounts of power to make one really powerful card. And at higher power levels, you can't really get away with that in the same degree. So with that in mind, I would suggest that at very high levels of commander, Mimeoplasm is used for its reanimation effect primarily, and the growing of those creatures secondary. And this is going to be informed by the cuts and the cards that I'm going to suggest as reanimation targets. Don't get me wrong, I do really like the idea of taking something like Consecrated Sphinx and saying, hey, what if we like doubled this thing's power? Or using a card such as Lord of Extinction, which can be very, very large, we could say hypothetically, well, what if we took Consecrated Sphinx and gave it +20/+20, making it a 24/26? That is a heck of a creature. But herein lies the problem, and this is the kind of, problem solving that I really want people who build decks and are learning how to build decks to really engage with. What is the difference between a 24/26 Consecrated Sphinx and a 4/6 Consecrated Sphinx at high power levels of Commander? Now, you might say, well, things like red removal are not going to affect the Sphinx, or things like Blasphemous Act aren't going to affect the Sphinx, or most commonly, the Sphinx can block or just do combat profitably, and a 24 power creature can attack very well on the next untap. And these are all true, but I think these are facts that if you are thinking about this, you should be considering a mid-power level of Magic, of a Commander, because these traits are not as good at high power Commander, because it's very, very common to be expecting your opponent's removal to ignore the 26 toughness this creature has. I'm talking about cards like Swords to Plowshares. I'm talking about cards like Beast Within, even though that's not a very high one. I guess Path to Exile would be the next one, but also other forms of removal that just ignore board clears, exile, destroy permanents, like things that just basically ignore this card's power. Not even including things like the fact that this creature's greatest problem getting into play is counter magic, right? To affect the reanimation spell or your commander. So traditionally, though 24/26 is insane, it just doesn't matter as much. Especially at certain tables of higher power commander, combat kind of goes to the wayside, and it's much more of a spells on the stack kind of play. Now, it's not CDH, but it's getting there. And I would also suggest that the real power of Consecrated Sphinx is the fact that you've drawn probably at least 6 cards, right? Because each of your opponent's draw steps by the time you get to your turn. That is way, way more powerful than the 24 power that this creature could potentially have. And of course, the text potentially is really important because it's not necessarily going to be the case. So I would actually argue the difference between a 24/26 Consecrated Sphinx and maybe, let's say, a 10/12 Consecrated Sphinx isn't that big, right? Maybe you want to get to 14 toughness to avoid Blasphemous Act, but generally you're not too worried about it. So with that in mind, let's look at the deck proper. Now, going over the things we usually go over, we can see we're on 33 lands, 36 including MDFCs. Now, that's lower than generally I would like and generally I suggest for, but I can see right here, we've got 4 Mana Dorks ready to go. We've got Soul Ring, and we also have Dark Ritual here to generate mana. We also have Carpet of Flowers, let's not forget that. And together, those cards really shore up the land count or the mana count to a point that I'm very happy with. Looking at the deck itself, we can also see that we are playing fetch lands. I believe we are playing only on-color fetches. Nope, we've got Scalding Tarn. So we're definitely playing off-color fetches as well, which is something I really do like at this power. I should have just seen the Bloodstained Mire, but I like at this power level, so we have a really high chance of getting the mana we want, and with the addition of all of the other mana producers, and even cards like Mystic Remora that allow us to get our first few draws in very quickly, can be really good to hit our land drops. So this is a really nice amount of lands. Looking into the curve itself, this is really, really nice. I do really like this. For people who make traditional reanimation decks, the mana curve is often way, way wonkier than this, right? It is just the nature of having a lot of really, really high mana cards that kind of jut out. And we can still kind of see it, like with 5 being so high, 7 being higher than 6 and 8. Like, we do see it still affecting the mana curve, but Death Penalties worked really hard to keep the majority of the curve really, really low. And with 5 being the only one that kind of sticks out because the commander is an additional card at this point. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the cards itself, and I really want to just be talking about the reanimation cards. I don't want to go the reanimation targets as well, but I don't want to go too much over the rest of the deck because I think it's really, really strong, but I think it bears repeating that if you are looking for high power reanimation, this deck has a really nice collection of cards that I think are worth looking at and things to be considering when you build these kind of decks. Like the counter magic is really, really good. I love the one of Nature's Claim. This is something I love in green decks, so I'm really happy to see it here. I can see like even the enchantment suite's really nice. The sorcery suite is really nice. I think the one thing that I really would like in here that's missing is probably like Dismember, because I wouldn't mind 1 or 2 more removal spells that are lower mana. You could even go like the Pongify, Rapid Hybridization. I should have included that in the high power things that remove 26 toughness creatures. But yeah, there's maybe a little more lower mana removal we could play, but probably unnecessary. You are the one, you're the one making the threats. You don't need to be as keen on destroying other people's creatures as you are on protecting your own. So looking at the collection of reanimation creatures, one of the benefits of the Mimeoplasm is that lower mana creatures that aren't really threats in and of themselves are way better when you can just arbitrarily stick 6 +1/+1 counters on it. So Blossoming Tortoise becoming like a 9/9, let's say, is pretty good. But generally that 6 power and toughness comes at the cost of another creature you'd like to reanimate, so it's not necessarily free. But I do like the inclusion of cards like this as mid-level or let's say engine style reanimations. Like you want to reanimate the Blossoming Tortoise and say, hey, this is going to help me get further in the game. Or you want to reanimate Ledger Shredder and say, hey, this is going to get me further in the game, which are all good decisions. But let's start looking proper at the cards, starting with Fell Beast going downwards. So Fell Beast is the card I mentioned earlier, where this has a, when it enters, target opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Of course, traditionally this is supposed to work with Devour, but as you might suspect, when you Mimeoplasm this creature in and give it like 20 +1/+1 counters, that is a 20 life point steal, so a 40 life swing, which is really, really impressive. Now, this really fits into what Death Penalties wanted, where this creature is meant to be taking out your opponents one at a time, as opposed to kind of like taking them all out. And I do like this, and I think it is a pretty good threat that when summoned and left, you're pretty happy. But once again, I would say the difference between this having like 6 to 7 +1/+1 counters and this having 20 +1/+1 counters is low. And maybe that sounds a bit ridiculous to some players because they might say, well, Cursed, stealing like 20 life is way more important than stealing 6 life. And I would just remind you that, like, once again, this is really high power commander. I think until you can steal lethal, it doesn't really matter. You could threaten 2 hits with this, and I think that is very reasonable, but I really don't care for this to be insanely big if it can't take out a player immediately. So that's my take on that, but I do understand that sometimes it's going to be very, very strong to drop this for 20. Still, great card. Moving on, Body Double is a really nice backup reanimation card. It also can work as certain, if you have Reanimator cards that reanimate other cards, it can be on the chain where you reanimate this, which reanimates another card, which reanimates a third card. That can be really, really fun. I'm going to be suggesting a card that does that, and in that case, I do like it. However, it's 5 mana as just a reanimation spell. If you are using this as just a 5 mana copy creature in your graveyard spell, it's pretty bad, right? It's really, really dependent on what's already in the graveyard. It comes in as it's like a 0/0 in the graveyard itself, so it works a bit clunkily with Mimeoplasm, where you can't use it for the +1/+1 counters, and it doesn't really work unless you have another creature that you'd rather be reanimating anyways in the graveyard. Like, it's a little weird like that, so I don't particularly like this. I think I would just rather a low mana reanimation spell, of which I have one of those in additions. Yeah, it is very cute, and I love the art, but I think we can just do a little better. Consuming Aberration was a card that the deck builder Death Penalties already suggested probably should come out. And so I'm gonna lump this in with also Lord of Extinction, and did we have one more? Lumra, and yeah, so those three, Lumra, Lord of Extinction, and the Consuming Aberration all have star abilities for their power and toughness. So for those who don't know, when a card is star, you calculate their power and toughness no matter what zone they're in. So unlike cards that like gain +1/+1 counters or gain plus or minus depending on board states, they don't have those abilities in other zones. But cards that have star always need to have a power and toughness. Like they cannot be star, like that's not an option. So therefore, wherever they are, they need to be able to calculate what this is. The main benefit of this is to play with, in this deck, Mimeoplasm, where you can use this to exile it and put 50, 30, whatever absurd number of +1/+1 counters on that creature, that the other creature you're reanimating. And that's really cool, but, and this is a big but, and I don't love saying this, I don't think that's good enough. I think there is an element of testing here that I may be missing, and there's an element here of play groups and what their board states and their graveyards look like, but I just don't think these cards are bringing enough consistently enough. And I have a bit of a clue here. The clue is that Death Penalties themselves suggested that we take out the Consuming Aberration. And I would suggest that if Consuming Aberration at this power level represents the power that I see these cards being touted, that would never be on the option. We have only so many versions of this effect, and between Lord of Extinction and Consuming Aberration, we have only two that actually have this literal text here, and to say that we're going to remove it, like halve the number, to me speaks to the fact that it's maybe not as good as we'd hope, which is unfortunate. I think it's a really, really cool effect, and if we are taking out the Consuming Aberration, we have to be taking out the Lord of Extinction too, right? I'll leave this to the deck builder, but the difference is, what, one line of text, right? Both of these have that they're equal to the number of cards in each, in all graveyards. Sorry. There is one difference. Okay, sorry. I thought they had the same text for its opponents, but Lord of Extinction counts yours. And I think that's probably why the deck builder would pick on the Consuming Aberration, because they think generally the Lord of Extinction will have more cards, you'll have more cards in your graveyard to make this card more of a threat. And I think that's fine. I would either remove both or one. I think it's a pretty safe remove. I would probably remove both. The main idea is that Lord of Extinction is a very, very clunky card. We don't have haste enablers. We don't have ways to one-shot our opponents without doing the combo with our commander. So this becomes a card we just want in our graveyard and nowhere else. And I don't think that's particularly good. I don't love the fact that our other reanimation spells just never want to target this card over anything else. I think it's easy to just say, let's cut it. All right, let's quickly go over the rest. Golgari Grave Troll. I think I like this or Stinkweed Imp. I don't like both. They do very, very similar things. And though we are a self-mill deck, I don't really want this to be the way we self-mill. I think the opportunity of cost of dredging cards in one-on-one formats is very different than a four-on-four or four-player format, right? So like in Modern Dredge or other Dredge, the idea of getting rid of one of your card draws is fine because you're representing milling through a significant portion of your deck with a really high chance of flipping over the cards you need to win the game. Whereas Golgari Grave Troll only mills not 10% of your deck, but less, right? And because of that, it's also not guaranteed to mill the cards you need to mill because, well, we have a singleton format, but also 6 cards out of 100, or let's say 6 cards out of 80 is just not that much. Likewise, Golgari Grave Troll is honestly terrible to reanimate. It is a 0/0, and it, like I said before, this creature is counted as a 0/0 everywhere, and it only comes in with +1/+1 counters, which, don't get me wrong, there's some synergy there with like the Fell Beat. No, you can't even make it work that way. Yeah, no, this is not good. I think it's really cute, and it's going to be a card that you just don't like and you don't want to see in your graveyard. Whereas at least Stinkweed Imp can be cast reasonably, can block reasonably. It has a really interesting pseudo death touch ability, which is neat. And if not, Life of the Loam is also here, though I would suggest also cutting that as well. So Golgari Grave Troll, not looking great. Skithiryx, really fantastic, but also falls into the thought process that I'm having right now that I think emblemify. That's not a word. Emblemifies. My goodness, I think I'm just making up stuff here. This is a card that really shows exactly what the problem I have with playing cards like Consuming Aberration and Lord of Extinction in a deck of this power level. Because Skithiryx doesn't need that sheer amount of +1/+1 counters, right? Skithiryx needs 6 +1/+1 counters, and it is a lethal threat. It comes with haste, it's really, really strong. I really, really like it. So this is a fantastic card, and just further shows that we don't need the giant creatures to make this deck threatening. Underrealm Lich, wow, I am having a hard time with words today. Underrealm Lich is a card I do really like, but I think once again we've kind of power crept past it. It's cute, this like kind of look at the top 3, pick one, mill the other 2. The fact that you can just keep it indestructible forever, these are all cute things, but I just don't see this at this power level. Like, I don't want to play this at mid power level anymore. So to me, if you're not comboing out with this card, which is something some decks can do, I don't really see the point here. And maybe the combos here, but I know that there's purposely no combos in here that win the game with all your opponents. So I have to assume the combo itself is not here. Looking at skipping over, of course, the Consecrated Sphinx. Great card, no problems here, no notes. Disciple of Freyalise, no notes, great card. Lumra, really cute. I like Lumra way more than the other star creatures because I think it's reasonably like later game 6 to 7 to 8 power and toughness, and its ETB or it itself as a reanimation target is just way better than the other 2 star creatures. So partially the reason that I'm saying just toss the other ones is by the sheer power of Lumra, who is quite a beast in and of itself. Yargle and Multani. So this is tough because, like, as much as I want to say, well, we're tossing out Consuming Aberration, we're tossing out the Lord of Extinction, why would we keep this? Like, they serve the same purpose. But I will say, this is very much so dependent on how often Yargle and Multani outpace in power the other 2 creatures. And I would imagine the answer is often, right? Maybe not so much Consuming Aberration, Lord of Extinction, because the cards you're putting in the graveyard, but I imagine it's very cleanly higher power for less effort. And after like a graveyard wipe such as Bojuka Bog or something, Yargle and Multani will still represent 18-6, which is really nice. So though I don't love this card in a lot of ways, it's really cute. I do see its like kind of low effort 18 power as a really nice thing to reanimate onto something. Coming down here, we've got Jin-Gitaxias, great card. I'm really happy with it. Coma, once again, really good. I almost like the other Coma as well because of the sheer, the immediate threat that it produces and the sheer number of bodies it can make. But this one's good too. This one's very strong in multiplayer, so I think it is a nice choice for reanimation. Once again, a card that just does not need more power and toughness. It is just fantastic otherwise. Nezahal. Nezahal is not a card I really like, but that's probably a me problem because I do understand how strong this is and how much stronger it gets in Commander. I feel like there must be better choices, but for the moment, I'm not going to pick on Nezahal too much. Toxrill definitely feels like it can go. Toxrill is not a card that really functions at this high power level because this card, don't get me wrong, is really cool, but does not end the game in a quick manner. It is slow, it is cute, honestly, and your opponents are either not going to care at all, or you're already winning and it doesn't matter, right? Your opponents very specifically need boards that will be affected by Toxtril, which is not really that common at this power level. Either they're going to have very, very big threats or very, very diversified threats. And if they are token decks, they're not going to be 1/1s most of the time. They're either going to be very, very big or they're going to be aristocrats. And if that's the case, you're just going to be like, okay, whatever, I don't care. We also don't really have anything meaningful to do with the 1/1 slug tokens we create. We can sacrifice them, but that's a mana sink in a deck that does not require mana sinks. So though I really like Toxtril, very, very cool card, I genuinely think this is not the deck for it. Still a few more to go. Real quickly, Tyrannix Rex. This is just another like weaker Skithiryx, but still very, very good. I do like this. I think what's nice about this with the Trample, Haste, Ward 4, the Toxic 4 is kind of meaningless, but still pretty good. This is a really nice collection of stats that putting extra counters onto this creature benefit a lot. This is one that you can reanimate this card early and just forget about it, right? Just attack, 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 and take out your opponents while you continue to build your board. And I really, really like that in reanimation decks. I think too often we've got too many cards tuned to one part of the game. This was something I was trying to say earlier with the Blossoming Tortoise. Like, it's really nice to have mid-game or early-game reanimation targets that will distract your opponents and force them into situations where they can't really profitably deal with what else you're doing. This is, once again, saying, like, there's going to be a subset of players that sees a turn 2 Tyrannix Rex and go, the game's over. There's no way I can deal with this. And there's going to be other decks that go, okay, we got to deal with this. And the difference is going to be power level. And I would suggest this is an appropriate place where you could get turn 2, turn 3 Tyrannix Rex and not win the game, but at least get some advantage and some distractions. Be careful though, because at this power level, your distraction might allow someone else to win. Because if a bunch of people have to, really pull together to take this card out, or a bunch of people get very frustrated at you, or you manage to take out a player early, you might be opening the floodgates for a second player to have to get ahead while you just don't have, like, everyone spent their removal or spent their card advantage spells or their fast mana in order to get around that Ward 4, or to used an early board clear when they shouldn't have, and all of a sudden someone else can, establish a really, really good board while you are trying to get back on your feet. So, I mean, still play this card, it's fantastic. Cataract Leviathan is also, it's a card I like. I do appreciate that it is a mass bounce spell on a creature. Definitely this is one of those creatures that needs Mimeoplasm, because a 5/5 with this ability is just okay, but if this was like an 11/11 or higher, you'd be a lot more happy with it. Still, I think we're getting to that, power level that this card is getting less and less impressive, but if you have Reanimate in hand, this in your graveyard, being able to represent a bounce everything for such little mana, I think is a particularly good, a good card. I'm like having second thoughts as I say it. I don't know. I might cut this, but I'll leave it up to you. Coming near the end, we've got 2 left. Vorinclex, once again, easy, very strong card. It's a game changer for a reason. I personally don't think it's that broken, but it does something that your opponents are really not going to like, where it messes your mana, and Valgavoth is fine. I don't particularly like it. I get that the ceiling of Valgavoth is really, really high, but the floor is okay. And the floor in high power is your opponents ignore it. And that's the greatest threat, if you ask me, about Valgavoth, right? That's like the worst thing in a reanimation deck, is to reanimate something and your opponents to look at each other and go, well, we're just going to ignore that, right? Like, Valgavoth represents so much power, not just that in card advantage, but also 9/9 flying lifelink. But for opponents that are going to try to combo win you out, or just attack you through Valgavoth and force a block, that's going to be less impressive. So once again, depends at what point in the game this is reanimated. This is definitely stronger early on, than the Tyrannix, but this does have a bit of a problem where it can be ignored. Still very good. All right, let's go into my additions. This video is going long already. We're going to jump right in and talk about a bunch of reanimation targets that I think are worthwhile of considering. So Colossus Grave Reaper is going to be the poster child of reanimation, I think, for a while now. The ceiling and floor of this card are really, really good. This has Titan abilities, so it means it will trigger on enter or attack. You mill 3, and whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put one of them onto the battlefield. These two lines are not connected, and that's so important, because that if they were connected, it would be a good creature. And they're not connected, so this is an insane creature, right? This just means that when this comes into the battlefield, you're probably guaranteed to get a creature. But then whenever you use any other of your self-mill or tutor or entomb, right? You can cast this, hold 1 black mana, and entomb at instant speed, and that's a card going from your graveyard to your library to the graveyard and immediately reanimate it. Like, this card is insane. If you are in Golgari in any way and you're playing Reanimator, this is probably your target to reanimate every single time. It is fantastic. It also functions that you might want to exile this to Mimeoplasm to put 7+1/+1 counters. Or sorry, 7+1/+1 counters. Don't do that. You want to reanimate this card anytime you can, but in a pinch, Dragon Food will do. So, fantastic card. If any card is going to be the one you take from the list, let it be this one. Then we have one that I really like touting on the opposite scale of budget, where this card is so cheap, but I believe has a place in every single commander deck. It's Dusk Mangler. Dusk Mangler is such a card advantage engine for the mid-game reanimation plan. You play this out early, your opponents all lose a creature, a card, and 4 life. And honestly, that's just a really good mid-game trade to kind of pressure your opponents, to keep them low on resources, so that your further reanimation spells get better and better. It's not crazy good, but when it goes in the graveyard, it being able to be exiled to Mimeoplasm to put 6 counters onto something is really nice. On boards where this is bad, you're just going to ignore it. But on boards where this is good, this is going to feel very good. It's just really nice to, like, in Reanimator, you can kind of imagine this as a powered up Plague... I can't remember what it's called. The 3 mana each player sacrifices a creature. Those Edict creatures, if you know the ones, Plaguecrafter, that's the one I'm thinking of. These cards are very powerful in certain situations, but as we get to higher and higher power, they become more and more unwieldy. If you just imagine Dusk Mangler as an Edict with 2 other abilities, it gets really good in Reanimator, because sometimes your opponents are just going to have their commander, or sometimes they're just going to have their card advantage creature, right? And being able to play the Dusk Mangler and immediately just clean that up, at least off one opponent, while getting the incidental value of discard and other creatures off the board is going to feel very good. But if we want the more powerful version, we got Archon of Cruelty. Now, Archon of Cruelty is only targeting one opponent, so it doesn't scale for multiplayer, but it doesn't change the fact that this is just an immensely powerful card. You get very real card advantage the second it comes in, and you get to push further and further every time you attack with this creature, right? That makes this a really good early reanimation, and forget about it. This becomes later in the game another kind of card that either you can exile to put +1/+1 counters onto something, or use it as the base because flying is pretty good. Like, it's just a really low effort reanimator card, and that's just really nice, right? Even cards like Consecrated Sphinx need a lot of things to work. Like, you need to keep the Consecrated Sphinx. Your opponents need to draw a lot of cards. Your opponents who are drawing cards need to not remove it before it goes to the next opponent's turn. Like, that's just a lot of things for it to go for it before you gain the card advantage, which is tougher and tougher at higher power tables. Whereas Archon of Cruelty just does what it wants on ETB, and then if you get that second trigger, once again, this is Titan coded, if you get to attack with it and get that second trigger, it's even more powerful. But just leaving the Archon on the battlefield and saying, okay, what do you guys want to do about this, is really strong. You don't need to overthink it. You just have it on the battlefield, and someone's going to have to use resources to get rid of it. And at that point, the card advantage you gain from it is very high. This one's a little trickier. I wanted to add Muldrotha in here. I don't know if this is the deck I'd want Muldrotha in, but it's still important to consider it. As you get more and more powerful in your deck, Muldrotha has this weird point where she gets very, very strong, right? Especially when you start playing 0-mana artifacts, or other forms of fast mana, or other forms of incredibly powerful enchantments, such as the Mystic Remora or the Carpet of Flowers that we're already playing. Muldrotha is just really good at coming out and giving you a really, really good turn where you can just replay a bunch of cards from your graveyard, especially if you just cast Reanimate for like 1 mana, get you really far ahead, and just look at your opponents and go, okay, you have to deal with the Muldrotha now because I've already gained the card advantage, and if it gets back to me, I'm going to gain even more advantage in the next turn. And I really, really like that. Like, maybe you're picking up, but my favorite reanimation targets are cards that do something very aggressively powerful on ETB or near ETB, and then represent that same thing over the next few turns, so your opponents have to spend resources to get rid of it, and even when they do, you're still ahead. And I think Muldrotha is a really good poster child of that. Something a bit lower mana, but I still wanted to note, because once again, we're talking about powerful cards, and Barrogoyf is a card that really, really catches my eye. So Death Penalties also asked about some self-mill, and I have another card as well, but Barrogoyf I think represents really, really well the package of self-mill and card advantage just put together, right? It's just a Lurgoyf, so it has that regular text that Tarmogoyf has, but much more important that whenever you deal damage to a player, you mill that many cards. It doesn't really matter how many you mill, I'm gonna say 2 to 3 is fine. And if you mill a creature, you will get that into your hand. I guess that does mean you want to mill more, but with the density of this deck, I think it's pretty likely to mill over a creature and get it. The sheer card advantage that this provides, coupled with the Death Touch lifelink of this creature, like I think Canlander and other places where you can play this card, this is a really, really strong card. I don't know if people play this in Legacy. I would say I hope so, but I just don't know what Legacy looks like anymore. This just represents so much power with really, really cool art. That I think this is a really nice mid-game, non-reanimation card that, because of the star, right, still represents a really good Mimeoplasm target. Now, this is probably still going to add 5 or 6 counters, but that's still really reasonable for a card that is very little effort and is really functional in every other zone in the game. One more reanimation threat that I thought was notable. This probably works better in more combo-focused versions of the deck, but Hoarding Broodlord is just really, really good as a card that tutors when you reanimate it. It's also 7/6, which means a good amount of +1/+1 counters from Mimeoplasm, but I think the really easy way to use this card is you reanimate the Hoarding Broodlord using something other than Reanimate, and then you get Reanimate from your deck, tuck it under the Broodlord, or I guess it just goes face down in exile, and then immediately convoke the Broodlord to cast Reanimate on another threat in the graveyard. And if you have a single other creature, that now goes to what? Like Animate Dead, a bunch of other 2-mana reanimation spells, and so on and so forth, which is really, really impressive. Being able to, once again, have a card that immediately does the thing you want it to on ETB, and then get another more powerful card they have to deal with while you still have a 7/6 is very, very good. I really like that. There's also cases where you will Hoarding Broodlord to get a card, and you just leave it, face down for as long as you can to psych out your opponents and have a really good interaction spell, like whenever you need it, which I do really like. All right, going into reanimation, I always want to suggest Life and Death because they're just very good cards. It's just a 2-mana reanimation from your graveyard, but otherwise is Reanimate, which is still very, very good. But I also do want to note Life. When you're playing Reanimation at this power level, it is appropriate to be able to use Life offensively. If you use the right cards, which I think this current iteration of the deck doesn't, I guess Toxrill would work with Life, so that's on me, but yeah, it would actually. Okay, that's a reason to maybe consider Toxrill, but you could do a situation where you have Toxrill out or another creature that We can't use Elishnorn here, but something else that kind of reduces the power or temporarily removes toughness from a bunch of creatures. You cast life before, and then you reanimate the creature, and then you destroy all lands on the battlefield. Or if you got one of those cards that only affect your opponents, such as Toxtrol, you destroy all your opponent's lands. And at this power level, nobody's going to be mad at you for that. That is an appropriate play at this power level. So if you are allowed to do this, why wouldn't you? So life and death feel like really, really good inclusions. Two more mill things actually. Overlord of Baelmerk, the sheer power of this card is insane. Both as a reanimation target and a reanimator and an attacker. Once again, Titan ability. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but if you put the Titan ability on a creature and the ability is good, I'm going to want to reanimate it. It's just the rules. I don't make the rules, I just play the cards. And with that in mind, compared to a lot of the other self-mill cards you have here, Overlord is just way, way better. And though we don't have ways to blink it as we do in Modern, it's still really strong and should be considered. It is unfortunately a little pricey, but we have a high budget on this deck, so I think it is a reasonable include. A much cheaper card that does mill is Malevolent Rumble. I just want to compare this to Satyr Wayfinder, where this is just leagues better than Satyr Wayfinder. Like, don't get me wrong, you can't reanimate this, but why would you reanimate the Wayfinder? Because, well, it's awful. But the difference between having a card that always will grab you a land and you just don't have any other choice, and then you're stuck with a 1/1, you now have this card that will generate an additional mana through its colorless Eldrazi spawn, but also can grab any permanent from the cards that you're going to mill. And then the last thing I'll say on milling, there's going to be situations where your opponents are ready to exile your graveyard or have a Rest in Peace or something like that active, and Malevolent Rumble is very, very notable of getting around that. It is much like Grisly Salvage, where you reveal the cards first and then you mill them. And they've stopped doing that as much. Now a lot of the cards will mill first and then you pick, so certain effects will get rid of that. But here, Malevolent Rumble will always work. And for the last card, I did want to suggest Saw in Half. Saw in Half is a fantastic card. It's really, really cool and fun. And though I don't love that it came from Unfinity, I do appreciate it is now a Bloomburrow in... God, that art is so dark. In-universe version. This is such a strong card in Reanimator because your cards are already incredibly powerful, and to be able to sacrifice them and turn them into two different cards is really, really strong. I just think insanely powerful, and in a pinch, it is technically removal. In a lot of situations, you do not want to use this as removal, but technically it is. I guess a way of doing it is it could kill your opponent's commanders very cleanly if they don't have ETBs. But regardless, this is fantastic, and I do really suggest it. And that's going to be all of my suggestions for Mimeoplasm. I hope you found some reanimation targets you may have not thought of for a deck like this. And if you know any reanimation targets that you would suggest, please put in the comments below. This looks like such a fun deck. This is the exact kind of reanimation deck I really, really like. And I do love that we're playing such a classic commander at the helm of it. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you so much for setting the deck. And good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.